one of the most, I'll start over to get this. We're talking about the nature of the church, and it has to do with what our Anglican Institute is going to be doing and sort of promulgating in the church. And Bishop Newbegin was the founding director of the Anglican Institute, and he wrote a book called The Household of God. And I mentioned this in a sermon a couple weeks ago. The chapter titles, I think, say a good bit about this. They are the congregation of the faithful, the body of Christ, the community of the Holy Spirit, Christ in you, the hope of glory unto all nations. In other words, this isn't a theological course as much as it is an existential understanding of what the community of which we are a part is like. And so I believe these headings describe well the vision and understanding for a parish church and the larger church beyond us. The church which God intends to be the antidote to pagan cultural assimilation and destruction. I mentioned in my sermon that one of the issues in the church is that reformational theologies tend to delineate the differences between us within the church, as opposed to the church delineating the difference between a life in Christ and the life in the pagan culture. We believe Anglicanism does that in the best possible way. That is, delineate the difference between a life in Christ and a life in the pagan culture. And that's what our intention is in this class. Not so much as to delineate that, but what does the community of faith that is different than that look like? We can watch the evening news and see what the fallen world is like. We need to see what our world is like. We started in our discernment process about what kind of parish. We just wondered, what are we supposed to do here? Now that we're here as a community, are we supposed to just hang out with each other? Or what are we supposed to do? Does God have a purpose for his church? And I went to one of these conferences that I don't usually like to go to in Washington, D.C., and Bishop Dobbs had a guy named Steve Garber speaking. And I thought to myself, I don't want to hear this guy. So I got my rental car and I drove into the city and went to the Patagonia store, which is my favorite thing to do in a city, is go to the Patagonia store. And there was a space right in front of parking on Wisconsin Avenue in Washington. There's never a parking place on Wisconsin Avenue in D.C. There it was, right in front of the Patagonia store. I went in, cruised all around, didn't find anything I wanted, got my car, and I thought, well, this Steve Garber guy's probably finished. I'm going to go back to the conference. And I get back all the way to Tyson's Corner, and they're just introducing Steve Garber. So I sit out in the room with this guy, with Ron Goss, who Jesse met on Thursday, an interesting guy. And we were out there talking, and I could hear the Steve Garber talking. I thought, that's kind of interesting what he's saying. And then I kind of went in the back of the room and listened to him, and I thought, whoa, this is really good stuff. So after the talk, I said, you've got to come out to Colorado Springs. We need your help. And so he came out. And this is what he left us with in looking at what kind of church we should be. He said, in the simplest and yet most meaningful way, God has asked us to be signposts of the world that someday will be, even as we live all day long in the world that is. That there are good people doing good work, yearning for the day when all hopes will be realized and all fears will be banished. Just to be a group of hopeful people where we are in the place where we are planted. And then he always uses this metaphor about if we are going to live our life to the glory of God, if we're a street cleaner, our streets should reflect the glory of God. They should be so clean. really like that metaphor. The idea of where we are, the world is better. And not just better, it glistens with the presence of God. Just where we are. And we do that, as we have always done, by devoting ourselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, the breaking of bread, and the prayers. Acts 2:42. That's what the church is supposed to do. No need for anything else. That sentence tells us what we're supposed to do. Devoted to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, the breaking of bread, and the prayers. So that idea became the idea for what a model parish would look like. What are we supposed to look like? What are our ingredients? What is our life supposed to be like? Well, this morning I talked in my sermon about praying, paying, and participating. I always like alliteration, so those came to me. But I think it's true. Those three things: praying together as a group of people, our worship; paying, that we have the resources both to do what we need to do and that our own hearts are converted and redirected; and participating, being the critical mass of people that can inspire others, that can do the work God has given us to do. The old model for the church is you just hired a priest to do what you needed done, and then you went to brunch. That's not our case here. So let's look at what these things involve, and then what I would love is, as you hear things missing that you've experienced in other places, or that you discern as we move forward that need to be added, email them to me, because we're in the process of developing this. This program that I announced in my sermon, our first intern is going to be Jess Barklow. You all know Jess Barklow. His wife, Christine, was the director of children's education. Jess is in the divinity program at Princeton Seminary. He's going to be back for the summer. And the great thing about having Jess here is, first of all, he knows the parish. He knows us. He's got a lot of the tradition already ground into him. But one of the things I've agreed with Jess to do is to help us develop this intern program as a participant developer, to give us feedback as we're going through and figuring out what all we can do. So, the basic model church, the apostles' teaching. So we have a parish education program that is very serious and purposeful. I just don't sit down and think of who might be available I could get next to fill in Sunday so I didn't have to do it. That's the words you never want to see in our church is the Rector's Forum. Because the Rector's Forum means everybody that the rector has invited to speak in his place. And sometimes it has nothing to do with anything with the church, if you look around at churches. We're very purposeful about what we are teaching and preaching. And this goes from the ground up. In the nursery, what the children experience, what kind of toys they have and what they're playing with. In the youth class with David Eaton, in the Sunday morning class. If you want to meet purposeful, just have a discussion with Erica Bonesier, and you will meet purposeful face to face. I mean, it's wonderful. It's brilliant. Our Sunday school is terrific. So is our nursery. So is our youth class. These are some of the ingredients that God has brought together here. So that, as Roxanne Seither says about the nursery, it's the only nursery in the world that has somebody with a degree from Hillsdale in English literature. That's the director. And so Erica Bonesire's father is a bishop in ACNA, in the REC. David Eaton is one of the rock stars in the country of training people how to do youth ministry. I mean, we don't have, the first Sunday I came to Colorado Springs, the first month I was there, I asked the priest who was in charge of the Sunday school, Well, who are your teachers that you have lined up for this fall? Because we need to do some training. And he said, well, we don't really do it that way here. The way we do it is we see who signs up, and while they're signing up, we'll look around and we'll grab different parents that will kind of watch over them on Sunday morning while their parents are in church. So I called an emergency vestry meeting and said, this isn't going to work. And I've talked to Marty Mann, whose father was a very prominent Lutheran pastor and writer and radio person, to run our Sunday school. And we went out and recruited teachers. We chose teachers and called them to teach. And we went from 15 in the Sunday school within 2 years to 250 in the Sunday school by being purposeful. Well, we have that kind of team. And that was the basis for starting to look at, well, what are we going to do when we start looking at all these gifted people we have. So, apostles teaching, the education program. We've got men and women Bible studies. Carla Probert is teaching the women's Bible. Kurt Emery, who's done this for how many years have you taught Bible studies? You still haven't volunteered? No. I got him to do it with me, and then I stopped showing up. But Kurt's done this forever in the military and has a great Bible study. Carla has this job security here, that if I'm not nice to her, the women of the parish, led by my wife, are all over me. But it's a great and purposeful study. So the apostles' teaching. And we do talk about stewardship, as I did this morning. But we also do this in other ways through our parish communications. Carla did this wonderful thing all during Holy Week with pictures and descriptions of everything that went on. And I read those, and I actually incorporated some of the things that I learned for the first time by reading what Carla had put out by email to all of us. So in our newsletter and our email mailings, one of the things that we're doing in the parish is we're hiring Dave Paris. Where's Dave today? He's what? He's curling his hair. Dave Paris is going to be the Anglican Institute Scholar in Residence. And some of what he's doing in the line of that we'll get to later. But we'll have weekly articles by Dave Paris that go out, not maybe weekly, but on a regular basis. Okay, so the apostles' teaching. And then the apostles' fellowship. Well, the apostles were always together, and what were they doing? They were always eating. They were always gathered in the room. My favorite that we've read several times over Holy Week, the apostles were together behind closed door for fear of the Jews. I've told this a million times, but I just can't get over it because our friend Fred Barbie, who was a priest in St. Louis with us, lived in this high-rise right near the church called the Dorchester. That St. Louis, has like the second largest Jewish population of anywhere in the country. And they were mostly Jewish widows that lived in his building. And it was called the Dorchester. So he gets up there in the pulpit and he says the disciples were gathered behind locked doors for fear of the Jews. And he says, sounds like the Dorchester to me. It was exactly where he lived. Where was I going? But the whole idea of the apostles together is a good bit of what we do. Coffee hour is that way. Parish events are that way. The dinners that we just have together with no particular purpose other than to get together. Although we have now found with Cajun Vic the best Cajun food in town that we can have right here. Our dinner groups, our small dinner groups, foyers groups, and then various parish ministries when we get together. Jesse keeps saying, when are you going to get the men to do this? When are you going to get the men to do that? Well, those working projects are really great stuff. You should have seen the men of the parish clear out the undercroft of the church with axes cutting through power lines. sparks flying everywhere and circuit breakers. They're very professional. So all these parish events, and one of the things that we do on an ad hoc basis that we're going to form up, as I was thinking about what we were going to do and talking to Bishop Orji about it on Friday, is to develop a much more purposeful and disciplined newcomer program with introduction classes, with confirmation classes. You notice that it's hard to get Bishop Orji here, and that's because we behave. And he's got so many people who aren't behaving. He's always got to go off to these other places. I have been with a lot of bishops over the last few weeks, and they're constantly defrocking clergy. So I've got to really behave with Mike watching me right here. But they're so busy with those sorts of things that coming to a parish where we're obedient to our bishop and adore our bishop and fund our bishop, it's sort of hard to. So he's trying to figure out when the warmest time of the year is. So he got in our car to go to the airport on Friday, and he was covering up with his briefcase and everything else because the air conditioner said at 72 was freezing cold to his Nigerian blood. Although I have found in further delineation by 23andMe that I am 1% Nigerian. And so my status within the church has skyrocketed. It's only my skin pigment that's holding me back. So a new member assimilation project with brunches and confirmation classes and introductory classes. And our fellowship includes our pastoral ministry. Premarital counseling, hospital visits, visiting with people in strife, just getting to know one another. This is much different in this parish of 500 than it was when we were at Grace Church with 2,400. There's an interesting story I was telling Foley Beach about, that we used to confirm 100 to 120 people a year, didn't we, Shirley? It was a lot of paperwork to confirm all those people. And as we grew and got up to 2,400, 100 compared to 2,400, our actual percentage related to our parish was declining. You see, 100 of 2,400 is less than 100 of 1,000. And so the bishop would no longer let me claim being the fastest growing parish in the diocese. He said, actually, you're in decline by your percentages. And so there was a parish of 20 that confirmed 2 people after we had confirmed 120, and he declared them, by percentage, the fastest growing parish in the diocese. Anyhow, what? Yes, you can prove anything with statistics. But anyhow, our fellowship is important to us. And I think, after doing this, I love to tell a story about Bishop Mins, who I've been in competition with ever since seminary. And I'd look in the book, and he'd always be 1,500 members, and we'd be 16, 17, 1,800 members. I'd beaten Bishop Mins. He was just a priest then. So I challenged him. I said, so Martin, I see that Truro Parish has been relatively sort of static here with 1,500 members. He said, oh, that's because every time we get to 1,500, we send 500 off to start a new congregation. 5 new congregations. This is something Bishop Orji is interested in doing. But a 500-member congregation actually is a lot, I think it has a life that's a lot richer, where we know everybody and spend time with people and know what's going on and miss people when they're not here. And it's a community where the members can get to know one another and recognize one another and feel comfortable because they know everybody who's here. I mean, you look around and we see new people, we can easily identify them. I loved it when greeters would always go up to Rebecca Taft, who's father was the founding rector of Grace Church, and she said, welcome, are you new with us? And she'd say, I've been here for 90 years. No, I'm not. Okay, so that's fellowship. The breaking of bread, Sunday and weekday worship, special services, weddings, funerals. One of the things we need to develop here are lay Eucharistic ministers, people in the parish who have been trained to bring communion to our shut-ins. We don't get to see them but about quarterly right now, and they need to be seen once a month. We need parish visitors to help us with different things with members of the congregation. Carla and the women do a marvelous job of bringing food to folks who need it after they've had surgery or a baby or a crisis in their family. But all of that, we need to do more of that. This worship thing is really interesting. I mentioned in my sermon about Bishop Jones praying, giving God thanks that by virtue of the fact we were worshiping, that in the spiritual world somebody would be converted to Jesus. Would it be people driving by on Montbello Road in Birmingham and seeing all the cars on a Thursday stacked into that place and all these guys in purple shirts? There were only about 2 of us in black shirts. It was all purple-shirted guys. Would it be that? Would it be the spiritual force of the wonderful worship that went on in that place? Or is it just randomly the spiritual sort of energy that flows out that touched somebody down in Mountain Brook Village who was just sitting there eating? I think Felix and I and Jesse were a great witness in the place we had lunch to that sort of thing. So the breaking of bread, and then prayers. So I've always tried to figure out what to do with that in these 4 things. Bishop Michael Marshall says that prayer is faith in action. That when we pray, God always sends us forth. And so we understand prayers really to be our outreach, which is prayer in action. And we have it right now in thinking about a model parish, split between those things. We do way out beyond ourselves. Mignone, Mercy Gate, Life Network. Mignone is the orphanage that we run for AIDS victim in Mignone, Tanzania. Mercy Gate is this wonderful ministry that helps those who need help. It's very discerning about who it helps and how it helps them. And it really is a wonderful program. Scott and I have been out and visited members of the parish. John Darling volunteers there. And then Life Network, which is a center for what they call abortion-minded women. Women who are challenged by a pregnancy and wondering what to do. And it is a fine organization with a success rate. If you go to Planned Parenthood with that in your mind, you will end up leaving with an abortion. The statistics are something like 92, 93% of the women who go to Planned Parenthood, isn't it that, Ann? What is it? Get an abortion. Where at Life Network, 89% do not. They give birth to the baby. And you'll hear people say, well, if you Christians would just support these people. Well, that's what Life Network does. I mean, it's got this cool shop in there full of baby clothes and all the things you need that you buy with points from going to classes about how to parent. And they have coaches that help young people who are having a baby. It's a terrific, terrific program. So what we are adding to that general model of a parish, which I believe is basically what a parish ought to be, and anything I've forgotten, we'll send this out so people can add in things that you've experienced that I may not have. What we're adding is we're reinvigorating our Anglican Institute with a scholar in residence, Professor Dave Paris, augmented by associate scholars. I mean, look at the lineup. We have John Stonestreet is helping us with that. John Stonestreet's actually, of all the theologians I've ever read, my favorite by far. He's so clear, and he's so good, and it's so applicable. So John Stonestreet's working on this. David Eaton's working on this. Heidi White, who's a very quiet member of our congregation, actually gives talks all over the country about Christian faith and life. Nathan, where's Nathan? He was here. There you are. Nathan is a great teacher of historic Christianity. Sarah Stonestreet herself, who organizes Downtown Discourse, and Carla Probert and Kurt Emery, all associate scholars that are going to, I'm just telling you now, Kurt, scholar, yeah. It's a very loose kind of thing. But we're going to add all kinds of things into how we teach people to be priests. I mean, Scott can teach them. I've learned so much from Scott since he's been treasurer about how to run the parish and how to work things out, and about different things that ACNA doesn't have that it needs, that we have here because you've put them in place. So the vestry last week, on Monday, asked me to do a 5-year plan. That was you, wasn't it, Andy? Oh. Well, I think that was David Eaton, yeah, he's big on asking me to do things. He'll text me, I'm having something delivered today at 7 o'clock this evening. Would you be there at the church to let them in? Thank you, David. I will sure do that. But Andy helped me do a 5-year plan 30 years ago that we're still using. And so this week when I was thinking about this, I need Andy and Scott to help me take this 5-year plan and make it a real 5-year plan. But basically what we're looking at doing over the course of time is in this first year to develop an operational board for the Anglican Institute, to develop a funding base for the Anglican Institute, because the Anglican Institute's not part of the parish operating budget. It's going to be a separate 501c3 or 4 or whatever we need it to be. Providing an operational budget, which includes having stipends for our interns, to have good interns. A lot of them are going to have families, like Jess Barklow has Christine and a new baby who was baptized here over Christmas. We're going to need to give them a stipend to do this. In the first year, we're going to establish this intern program, working with ACNA, with the Anglican chaplains. We've made contacts. One of the things we're doing is doing a lot of networking for this. So Michael Porter, I think he's still gone, isn't he? He's gone to a Q conference in Nashville and has been writing me about different people he's connecting with there in the name of our parish and Anglican Radio and the Anglican Institute. And so we're going to be working with these different groups within ACNA. I was very encouraged in my talk with Foley Beach this week that they really need that. John Stonestreet's talked with several ACNA bishops about the need for an intern program and has developed their support. This is what Mike does with the training of chaplains. We're going to do week-long events like we've done before here. Interns that are here just for the summer or semester, a year long, whatever their needs might be. We're going to establish this is all in the first year, establish a real online presence. One of the things that Dave Paris is going to do as a biblical scholar is take the lessons for the Sunday and the collect and write maybe an 800-word commentary on those lessons, so that clergy will be equipped just by going to that website to get some basic work done to direct them in their preaching, to make sure that it's biblical, it's orthodox, that it all fits together. If you read the collect today, you'll see that the main concern of Christians is Christ's redemptive work. And then as you read the lessons, it's all about the redemptive work of the church. The whole purpose of the faith is not to get a parking place or to be delivered the perfect house at the price you want to pay. It's your redemption, so that you no longer fear death. That's a pretty important thing. So Dave's going to be writing those kind of weekly preaching commentaries. We want to have articles on Anglican theology in journals, and working on this networking. That's the first year of what we're going to do between now and this time next year. Then in year 2, we're going to begin placing interns in congregations. In other words, after they go through our internship, help them find jobs in other churches as rectors or vicars. I mean, one of the things Foley Beach said is that people are coming out of seminary and being put in charge of a congregation. They don't have a clue what to do. They haven't been trained at all. And he would like them to go through some sort of internship. We'll develop parish models for congregations so they can have sort of a structure that they can live into. We can begin consulting with congregations and expand our intern programs into other parishes. So, for example, who do you think we want to place interns with? Eric. Right. I saw it on everybody's list. And to that end, Dave and Mike and Bishop Williams and I are all going to a conference on Anglicanism at Beeson Divinity School in Birmingham in September, once it cools off a bit. Year 3, we're going to add some staff and some support for our intern program, procure physical presence, office space and things like that, hold the first of a 3-day conference with noted theologians, and begin holding week-long training workshops for clergy and chaplains, which we'll probably do sooner than that, because that's what the bishop would like to do. Year 4, develop programs for presentations at diocesan synods, offer retreading support for clergy and parishes who have fallen in the ditch, and offer clergy placement services. And then year 5, develop culturally based programs. I've got my notes for the Nigerians. That's a world unto its own, in talking to Bishop Orji, or to people who are in California. And then develop some crisis intervention for clergy and congregations, and develop models for diocesan standards for parish growth. I developed at one point for Jerry Winterroad. He called me up and said, when he was Bishop of Colorado, he said, I need a program. I need something for diocesan convention to announce that we're going to do. And I said, Jerry, I've got an idea. I'll write it up and give it to you tomorrow. And so I wrote up this whole thing about standards for congregations and how you evaluate meeting goals and objectives and how you measure success or failure, all those kind of things. He did this big presentation on it. And the next week after convention, I said, so are we ready to get to work? We need to get some people together, begin to do this, communicate it to the clergy. He said, we're not going to do that. I just needed something for convention. So we were just going to drift along in mediocrity for another year until, and the next year he said, I need something for convention. What are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to bring in Adrian Plass. Well, Adrian Plass is one of the funniest people on the face of the earth about the church, who makes fun of the church's failure. So he just sort of said, well, if you're a diocese that's just drifting along like this, like we were doing, you are not serving the Lord very well. So that was sort of, after that I didn't get asked. But we want to develop those kind of models for dioceses. How do they measure growth and objective? I mean, we talk about this all the time, how we're going to, it's one of the reasons why everybody said yes to David's idea of a 5-year plan. How are we doing if we don't know we have a plan? I mean, this is part of what we're doing here, is articulating the development of vision for our own parish so we can see if we're meeting our goals and objectives. Have we established a proper new member assimilation program? Is our worship significant enough that it's impacting the world around us? So that's what we're about. I have 1 minute for questions. So in the middle of my sermon, I got a text from my brother who's staying, what's the guy's name, in Harold Lloyd's house in Palm Springs. Who? Harold Lloyd Jr.'s house. And so Jesse said, well, I think we saw him come out of someplace in San Diego in a Rolls Royce. So I emailed my brother and told him that we had actually seen Harold Lloyd. And then Jesse finds out, well, that Jesse and I had seen him, well, that Harold Lloyd had actually died before we ever knew each other. and so I wrote my brother and said, that's what made it so miraculous to see him. So my brother has written me something back. Okay. Next week, real serious business about the nature of the church.